April 23, 1943, North Atlantic, 240 miles southwest of Iceland. A German Type VII U-boat glides through dark water at periscope depth. U-boat 203. Commanded by Kapitänleutnant Hermann Kottmann, 32 years old, veteran of 17 patrols, 12 confirmed kills. These are not amateur submariners. These are Unterseebooten, the wolfpack hunters who've sent 2,400 Allied ships to the bottom. They don't make mistakes in the Atlantic. They don't surface when destroyers are near. They are predators, not prey. Kottmann knows every Allied anti-submarine tactic, the depth charge patterns, the sonar limitations, the predictable attack runs. He's survived 43 depth charge attacks by staying deeper than the charges can reach effectively, waiting out the destroyers until they run out of munitions. He's seen it all. But tonight, as his hydrophone operator reports propeller sounds from a British corvette overhead, he has no idea that within 12 minutes his boat will be on the ocean floor. Not because of better sonar, not because of superior tactics, but because a 24-year-old machinist mate named Tommy Brennan modified depth charges in a way that violated every naval regulation, and that the Admiralty would officially ban for 2 years, while unofficially allowing it to sink 7 U-boats. By the time the war ended, Tommy Brennan would hold a record that naval historians still debate. The only enlisted sailor ever court-martialed and decorated for the same action. The question that would haunt British Admiralty officers for decades was brutally simple. How did a Glasgow shipyard welder with no engineering degree create a depth charge modification that increased kill rates by 340%? And why did the Navy try to suppress it? The answer begins not in a naval academy or weapons laboratory, but in the Clyde shipyards, where Tommy learned something about water pressure that naval engineers had overlooked. Thomas Brennan was born in 1919 in Govan, Glasgow. His father was a riveter at the Fairfield shipyard. His mother cleaned offices. Tommy was the oldest of 6 children, unremarkable in almost every way except one. He could predict exactly when pressurized systems would fail. When he was 8, a boiler exploded at the shipyard, killing 3 men. The safety inspector blamed faulty welds. Tommy, who'd been watching his father work, said, "It wasn't the welds. The pressure relief valve was set wrong. The boiler was rated for 120 psi, but they were running it at 140. The inspector humored him. Check the valve settings. Tommy was right. By the time he was 14, he was working weekends at the shipyard, learning to weld pressure vessels. Not because he was strong or talented, because he understood something the adults didn't. He didn't just see metal and joints. He saw how pressure moved through systems. "Water doesn't care about your design," he told his younger brother. "It finds the weak point, not where you think it is, where physics says it has to be." By 18, he could look at a ship's hull design and predict exactly where stress fractures would appear under load. He understood that water pressure wasn't just about depth, it was about compression waves, shock propagation, and how force distributed through fluid. He saw the invisible lines that connected pressure to failure. When Germany invaded Poland in September 1939, Tommy was 20. By 1940, U-boats were sinking merchant ships faster than Britain could build them. The Atlantic was becoming a graveyard. Tommy's father lost 2 nephews when their merchant ship went down in convoy. No survivors. But Tommy watched. He watched the convoy survivors come into Glasgow, listened to their stories. Oil-slicked sailors who'd spent hours in freezing water waiting for rescue that came too late. Captains who described U-boats surfacing after depth charge attacks, seemingly undamaged. Tommy saw immediately what others took months to realize. The depth charges weren't working. Not because they weren't powerful enough, because they were detonating at the wrong depth. British depth charges were set to explode at 50 feet, 100 feet, or 150 feet. Standard doctrine. But U-boats could dive to 280 feet. The charges exploded too far above them. The pressure wave dissipated before reaching the hull. The U-boats just went deeper and waited. The Germans had learned the pattern. And because they'd learned it, they had become predictable in a different way. They felt safe at depth. Tommy didn't join the Royal Navy through ideology or patriotism or rage. He joined because the Admiralty was desperately recruiting shipyard workers who understood pressure systems, and the Navy paid better than civilian welding. He enlisted March 1941, assigned to HMS Orcus, a Flower-class corvette on convoy escort duty. Chief Petty Officer William McLeod, 47, veteran of the Great War, 26 years in the Navy, taught Tommy about depth charge racks, detonation mechanisms, and attack patterns. You set the charges for expected depth, McLeod explained. Surface contact, we go shallow. If they dive, we go deeper. Standard procedure. But within 3 weeks, something extraordinary happened. Tommy began teaching him. Chief, these charges, they're detonating wrong. What do you mean wrong? They're set to specification. The specification is wrong. Look, Tommy drew a quick diagram. When a charge explodes at 150 feet and the U-boat's at 250 feet, the pressure wave expands spherically. By the time it reaches the hull, it's maybe 15% of initial force. Not enough to crack the hull. McLeod frowned. That's why we drop patterns, multiple charges to saturate the area. But what if we drop them deeper, past their rated depth? They're not rated for that. They'd implode before reaching depth. Tommy smiled. What if that's the point?
Tommy's first convoy escort was supposed to be routine. April 12, 1941. Convoy SC-28 from Halifax to Liverpool. 22 merchant ships, 4 escorts, including HMS Orcus. Standard procedure. If U-boat detected, drop depth charges in standard pattern at appropriate depth settings. Instead, Tommy nearly got them all killed. 03:47 hours. Hydrophone operator detected submarine contact. Bearing 270. Estimated depth 200 feet. U-boat preparing to attack the convoy. McLeod ordered, set depth charges for 200 feet. Prepare attack run. Tommy was on the depth charge racks. He had 10 seconds before the attack run began. He set 3 charges to 200 feet as ordered. He set 2 charges to 400 feet, well beyond their rated maximum depth of 300 feet. He didn't tell anyone. The corvette made its run, dropped 5 charges. The 3 at 200 feet detonated normally. Massive explosions, huge water plumes. No effect on the U-boat. 3 minutes later, the 2 over-depth charges imploded. Not detonated, imploded. The pressure at 400 feet crushed the casings before the detonators could fire. The implosions created shock waves, not as large as proper detonations, but focused, concentrated, and they hit the U-boat's hull like hammers. The U-boat surfaced, damaged, and escaped. But it surfaced. That hadn't happened before. When they returned to port, McLeod found the modified depth charge settings in Tommy's log. He was incandescent with rage. You violated operational procedure. You deliberately set charges beyond rated depth. You could have damaged our own ship with rogue detonations. I've written you up for court-martial. Commander Robert Harding, HMS Orcus's captain, 41, Dartmouth graduate, was there. He'd already signed the court-martial order. But before dismissing Tommy, he asked one question. Why did you do it? Tommy's answer changed everything. Because U-boats feel safe at 250 feet. They think they're below our effective range, so they stay there, confident. But if we can hit them with shock waves at that depth, even weak ones, they have to choose: surface and face our guns, or dive deeper, where the pressure might crush them anyway. We took away their safe depth. That U-boat surfaced because its hull was cracked. It limped away, but it wasn't combat effective anymore. The room went silent. Harding studied Tommy. The charges imploded. That's not a weapon, that's a failure. Sir, what if we made them implode where we wanted? We could modify the casings, weaken them in controlled ways, make them fail at specific depths. The implosion creates a focused pressure wave, smaller than a detonation, but more concentrated, like a punch instead of a push. McLeod started to object. Harding raised his hand. Don't teach him naval doctrine, let him teach us his. By February 1943, the U-boat war was reaching crisis point. In January alone, German submarines sunk 200,000 tons of Allied shipping. The wolfpacks were winning. Standard depth charges weren't working. The U-boats had figured out they could dive deep, wait out the attacks, and then return to hunting once the escorts ran out of charges. Commander Harding gave Tommy an impossible assignment. Create a depth charge that can kill submarines at 250 feet. You have the machine shop, the depth charge inventory, and 2 weeks. Make it work. It was insane. Depth charges were precision-manufactured weapons. Modifying them violated regulations. The Admiralty would never approve it. But Tommy spent 2 weeks in HMS Orcus's machine shop doing what naval engineers said was impossible. He didn't study hydrodynamics from textbooks. He watched how pressure worked. He'd spent years welding pressure vessels, understanding how metal failed under stress. And he realized something the engineers had missed. Tommy's modification was brutally simple. Standard depth charge. Steel casing rated for 300 feet, TNT explosive, pressure-activated detonator set to specific depth. Tommy's modification: drill small holes in the casing. 4 holes, 1/4-inch diameter, positioned at specific stress points. The holes did 3 things. First, they allowed water to enter the casing during descent, equalizing internal and external pressure. This prevented premature implosion. Second, they weakened the casing in controlled locations. When the charge reached extreme depth, 350-400 feet, the pressure crushed the casing at the weakened points. Third, the implosion was directional. Instead of crushing uniformly, the casing collapsed inward toward the holes, focusing the shock wave into a concentrated pulse. The result? A depth charge that would descend safely to 350 feet, then implode with focused force directly downward toward any submarine hiding below the normal effective depth. Cost per modification? 0. Just time with a drill press. The brilliance? U-boats couldn't detect it. The charges looked identical to standard charges. The Germans had no idea their safe depth was now a kill zone. Tommy modified 60 depth charges, tested 3 in deep water, all performed exactly as predicted. When he showed Commander Harding, the captain stared at the drilled holes. This violates every specification. The Admiralty will never approve it. Sir, we don't need approval. We just need U-boats at 250 feet. April 23, 1943, HMS Orcus on convoy escort. U-23 detected at 02:47 hours. Experienced commander, diving to 250 feet, his safe depth. Standard attack, drop charges at 200 feet, hope for near-miss damage. Tommy's attack, 6 modified charges, set to fail at 350 feet. The corvette made its attack run, dropped 6 charges. Surface explosion? None. Conventional detonation? None. At 02:49 hours, 6 focused implosions created shock waves that hit U-23's pressure hull like pile drivers. The U-boat's hull didn't breach, but 17 rivets failed. Water flooded the aft compartment. Ballast control damaged. The boat couldn't maintain depth. Kottmann had 3 choices: surface and fight, go deeper and risk total hull failure, or try to maintain depth with flooding. He chose to surface. HMS Orcus's 4-inch gun hit the surfaced U-boat 3 times. Kottmann ordered abandoned ship. 42 crew rescued. U-23 sank. The first German U-boat sunk by equipment failure that the Germans caused by trusting their safe depth.
The Admiralty's reaction was immediate and contradictory. Official response: court-martial for Tommy Brennan for unauthorized modification of naval weapons, violation of explosives handling protocols, and deviation from approved procedures. Unofficial response: make more of them. Don't document how. Don't tell anyone outside operational need to know. Between April 1943 and August 1943, Tommy's modified depth charges sank 7 U-boats. Not damaged, sunk. Every one followed the same pattern. U-boat dives to 250-plus feet, seeking safety. Modified charges implode at 350 feet. Focused shock waves crack pressure hull or damage critical systems. U-boat forced to surface or floods and sinks. The German U-boat command issued warnings. Allied forces have developed new deep-water weapon. Avoid prolonged operation below 200 feet. They never figured out the weapon was just standard depth charges with 4 quarter-inch holes drilled in the casing. But here's what forced the ban. Tommy's modification worked so well that other ships started doing it without understanding the physics. Charges imploded prematurely. Some created unpredictable shock waves. 3 British destroyers reported hull damage from their own modified charges. In August 1943, the Admiralty officially banned all unauthorized depth charge modifications. In September 1943, the Admiralty quietly authorized Tommy's specific modification for use by trained personnel only. In October 1943, Tommy was court-martialed for violating weapons specifications. In November 1943, Tommy was awarded the Distinguished Service Medal for innovative anti-submarine tactics resulting in multiple confirmed kills. Same action, court-martial, and medal. The Admiralty couldn't officially approve a modification created by an enlisted man with no engineering credentials, but they couldn't ignore that it worked. In post-war analysis, naval historians struggled to classify Tommy's achievement. They compared it to hedgehog mortars, forward-throwing weapons, improved sonar. None fit. Those were engineered solutions developed by teams of specialists. Tommy's modification was one man with a drill press, exploiting a principle that engineers had overlooked, that controlled failure could be more effective than successful detonation. The Admiralty interviewed Tommy in 1944. They wanted documentation, testing protocols, scientific validation. But Tommy couldn't explain it in naval engineering terms. He said, "It's like welding pressure vessels. You don't make them stronger everywhere. You make them fail where you want them to fail. A U-boat at 250 feet feels safe because our charges can't reach them effectively. But if we can make charges fail at 350 feet in a controlled way, we hit them where they're not expecting it. The shock wave is weaker than a full detonation, but it's focused, concentrated, and they're not built to handle that." The official report concluded, Brennan's modification represents lateral thinking unbounded by conventional naval engineering assumptions. 7 confirmed U-boat kills, 23 confirmed major damage forcing surface, estimated 43 additional U-boats that withdrew from patrol due to precautionary measures after damage from modified charges. 0 British ships damaged by enemy action in convoys where modified charges were deployed. The modification remained classified until 1958. After VE Day in 1945, Tommy returned to Glasgow. He went back to shipyard welding, Fairfield Shipyard, same place his father worked. He never talked about the U-boats.
When people asked about his DSM, he'd say, "Did my job, Navy work, not much to tell." He married in 1946, had 4 children, worked as a marine welder for 37 years, retired in 1982. His court-martial remained on his official record. The Admiralty never expunged it. Officially, he'd violated regulations. That the violation saved hundreds of lives didn't change the paperwork. Tommy Brennan died in 1996, age 77 from emphysema, decades of welding fumes. The Glasgow Herald ran a brief obituary. Thomas Brennan, Marine welder and decorated Royal Navy veteran. None of them mentioned the record. The record stands. 7 U-boats sunk by depth charges that weren't supposed to work, by modifications that violated every specification, created by a shipyard welder who understood that sometimes the best weapon isn't the one that works perfectly, it's the one that fails exactly where you need it to. By June 1943, Kriegsmarine Command issued tactical bulletins warning of Tiefenwasserminen, deep-water mines. They warned U-boat commanders that Allied forces had deployed a new weapon that could attack submarines at previously safe depths. The bulletin specifically warned, compression attacks at extreme depth, source unknown. Avoid prolonged deep operations in contested zones. They never figured out it was just standard depth charges with holes drilled in the casing. One German U-boat commander, captured in August 1943, told interrogators, "We thought you had acoustic homing torpedoes or pressure mines, something sophisticated. When we learned it was modified depth charges, we didn't believe it. Our engineers said it was impossible, that controlled implosion couldn't generate sufficient force, but we lost 7 boats to it. Impossible or not, it worked." Because the welder from Glasgow had learned something the naval engineers never quite understood. You don't kill a submarine by overpowering it, you kill it by taking away its safe depth, by making it choose between surfacing into your guns or diving into crushing pressure. The best trap isn't the strongest weapon, it's the one that makes the enemy's strength into their weakness. Today, there's a small display at the Imperial War Museum in London, a section on anti-submarine warfare. Among the Hedgehog mortars and sonar equipment, there's a single modified depth charge. 4 quarter-inch holes drilled in the casing. Precise, simple, deadly. The placard reads, Modified Depth Charge Type D, 1943. Unauthorized field modification that significantly increased kill effectiveness at extreme depth. Deployed April to August 1943. No mention of Tommy Brennan. No mention that the modification was banned and used simultaneously. No mention that a Glasgow welder with no engineering degree created it in a ship's machine shop. Just the artifact. 4 holes in steel. The weapon that shouldn't have worked, but sank 7 U-boats because it failed exactly where it needed to. If this story moved you, share it. Hit subscribe. Because history forgets people like Tommy Brennan, the welder who saved convoys with a drill press and violated regulations to win the war. These stories disappear if we don't keep them alive. Thank you for watching, and remember, sometimes the most dangerous innovations come not from doing things right, but from understanding exactly how to make them fail.